All right, mates, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's having a good and great week of fishing here as we wind through the middle of August. We are going to talk today about a few things, but Academy Sports opening up in my hometown, Richmond, Virginia. Gonna have to hit that up. I'm sure there's gonna be a parking lot on West Broad Street. That's for sure. So Richmond will have a bunch of dicks. Bass Pro, Cabela's, Green Top. That's my favorite. And now an Academy Sports. So we'll see how it goes with Academy entering the greater Richmond market. Very competitive market. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Richmond, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia has hosted multiple Bassmaster Classics back in the day, of course. If you've been a follower of this channel, you knew all about that. I was 10 years old and had the ability to meet all those guys when I was 10 at the Richmond Coliseum. It got me hooked on fishing. But just like basically for the last 50, almost two, coming up in the next 2 weeks, years, I'm a local guy, man. I'm a homer, and Woo Daves will always be my favorite. Wormin' Woo Daves on the James River. Always going to be my favorite angler. Nothing changes. All these young guys coming up through the Bass Elite Series and MLF, love watching them, love them all. They're all great. They're all great. They're all crazy talent, man. Just awesome talent. But I actually am kind of been doing a lot of thinking and doing a lot of stuff lately. With some other people, some other content providers, some brand ambassadors, some influencers, some pro staff, you name it. However you define all those is completely up to you. About like what's next for the next generation. So I know we always all like to focus on the here and now. You know, who's at the top of the pack today, who's at the top of the leaderboard today. But there's not a lot of people talking about the next generation and how much harder and harder and harder it is. There are people on TikTok like Craig Johnson. Check him out. There are some podcasts on Facebook and on YouTube. You know, you just got to search for those that are kind of like give you some information, you know. Get as many voices as you can to kind of understand that, man, I mean, you know, I love the sport of fishing. I love kayak fishing. I love wade fishing. I love fishing. Okay? Jet boat fishing. Bass boat fishing. I just love fishing. Okay? But there are a lot of issues. Like, I mean, fishing's becoming like golf. Like, and we all know about golf. Okay? Like, we all know how, like, you know, how many people have country club memberships, okay, when they're kids to learn how to play golf? How many schools back in the day had golf teams in elementary and middle and high school? We know all about the history of golf, okay? And I play golf. I just played golf, okay? So, like, you know what I mean? Like, love it. I've worked at country clubs. I've worked at golf clubs in my career, okay? So I understand how that all goes. Country clubs, private clubs, all of that, okay? Fishing can't be like that, mates. I mean, fishing is a resource, natural resource like hunting. Like, you know, you should be able to demonstrate your talent and have your talent rise above whether or not you've got 50 grand or not, or 200 grand or not, right? I mean, are you the best? Or are you the best of the guys who could afford to actually fish? And where does that money come from, right? So everybody's scrambling, right, to figure out right now. You're going to start to see Facebook posts and videos about anglers like you've never seen before. You're going to start seeing anglers publicly seek out your help. You're going to start to see it. You absolutely are going to start to see it all over, you know, in the coming weeks. Because it's just not there. Powers that be are making things unattainable. Realistically unattainable for the average person. You know, even when you're starting out. And there's no pathway, right? I mean, you could fish local trails. You could fish as a co-angler. You could fish BFLs. You could fish, you know, it's going to be harder to fish opens. You got to fish online now. That's about 25 grand. I've talked to people, like, and this is interesting. I've talked to people in any number of formats, from if you want to look at the kayak side, which is an alternative, right? It's become an alternative in the last 5 years for people who understand that they're not going to have the ability to, reach their dreams in a bass boat. Financially, this has nothing to do with their talent. It has to do with financials and getting financial backing and in support. And plenty of people on, YouTube have talked about this. About, if you got financial backing, if you got family money, if you got sponsors because of your last name, because you're a junior, you're a third, you're whatever, that's great. No one's knocking that, man. That's opportunity. Go out there, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to catch fish. So no one has that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the people that are these high schoolers and these college guys that are absolutely talented, lights out catch fish, but they'll never get the chance to elevate themselves to the series without money. No other sport is like that, except for golf, if you think about it, because of everything you had to pay before you actually got into the PGA. Like, you were fishing, you were paying to play golf somewhere. Every round of golf, right? Greens fees, cart fee, all that stuff, right? Well, fishing, we can just go fish, right? Most of us aren't paying to go fish. We're not paying a fee. There are some fee lakes, there are some places, but for the most part, we can just go out and go fishing. Put a kayak in the water, a public water, a river or lake, and go fishing. We're not charged for it other than our licenses, right? It's pretty much how it is, and then all that stuff. But it's not going to be that easy anymore. When you're looking at having to compete in 9 events at the Bass Opens at the tune of $20,000 to $30,000, and that's like eating, give me a break. Like, what are you living off of, right? And gas and travel and all 9 events all over the country. And if you want to know something, honest, the truth, a microcosm of that kind of implication of that on a smaller scale, even in the kayak world, because kayaks were kind of an alternative, because say $5,000 or less for your kayak all rigged out. Like, people rig them all out with all kinds of expenses. That is not nearly your $60,000 base bass boat, okay? Then $12,000 of electronics, then all that stuff, right? But there are people on kayak boats that are buying $2,500, $3,000 kayaks. They may have autopilot, they may have trolling motors, they may have torpedo, they may have electronics and all that. So let's just say $5,000, $6,000 into it, ballpark. A lot easier, but the payouts are a lot less on all these tournament trails. But the expenses are the same. The travel expenses don't change. Doesn't matter whether or not you're competing in Bass, MLF, KBF, Hobie, KFL, or any other trail, local trail. The expenses for gas don't change. The expenses for hotel, campgrounds, accommodations, food, all of that stuff don't change. Insurance doesn't change. All that stuff does not change, right? So when you're looking at kayaking, there's a challenge there, in a sense that you've got competing things happening in the kayak community. Everybody seems to be carving out a niche which fragments from the whole community. And what I mean by that is, in kayak bass fishing, like in bass fishing, we have the Bassmaster Classic. And right or wrong, we look at that winner in that event as being the top angler in the country. Now, I don't firmly believe that. I believe a lot of that has to do with luck of the draw on a lot of stuff, on what body of water they put the Bassmaster Classic on. I personally don't think the last Bassmaster Classics, the people who finished maybe in the top 3 or 4 would have finished in the top 1, 2, 3 if the Bassmaster Classic was held on the St. Lawrence River. Okay? A smallmouth fishery. Or like Lake Ontario. Okay? Or it all really comes down to a lot of factors. And if the Classic is held on a largemouth fishery in the South, that plays to people's strengths. Okay? And to be the best fisherman, you've got to be able to, in my opinion, you should be an Angler of the Year guy. If you look at, that's who should be promoted as the best angler in fishing, because he's done it on all the different bodies and all the different species: spotted bass, largemouth bass, and smallmouth bass, right? I mean, that's how I look at it. I know people disagree with that. We like to have an event like the Super Bowl, the World Series, the national championship. We like to have one event and the winner is it. That's America, right? It's like apple pie, okay? So I understand that. But in the kayak bass fishing community, you don't have that. And people can argue with me about it, and that's fine. I'm open to take, I'm a reasonable lad. I don't, but I'm just saying, you've got the KABF champion, national champion. You've got the Hobie Tournament of Champions champion. You've got Bassmasters Kayak Series champion, usually paired with the Bassmaster Classic in that event. Kind of like, okay, who inevitably is the best angler in the kayak bass fishing community? Ask 10 people, you're going to get 8 to 10 different answers. Okay? And that stems from the fact there's no component that brings it all together. Okay? And that's, to me, how kayak bass fishing provides an opportunity today to really elevate and distinguish itself from everybody else, is to have a true champion, a true national champion of kayak bass fishing. How do you get that? Only way you can get that is having a national kayak bass fishing invitational. That is the only way you get it, where you invite the sponsors, okay, and the promoters who have no vested interest. The promoters have to be no vested interest, no financial interest in KBF, no financial interest in Hobie or in Bass. It has to be an independent body, okay, of people who make the decisions as to who gets invited to participate in a kayak bass national invitational tournament that will crown a national champion by invitation only, which means it doesn't matter how much money you have, because you can't buy your way in. You can't just buy your way in and fish and be able to fish whatever and stay up there, because you just buy your way in. And that's how tournament structures are. Let's be honest. That's how some tournament structures are. It doesn't matter what your skill level, doesn't matter your talent level, matters whether or not you can buy your way into the event, correct? Pay your entry fees and fish. You don't have to finish in the top 10, the top 20, the top 30 to keep your spot. You can just cut a check for the next season in a lot of instances, right? Or there's no mechanism in place at all like that, because it just starts all over the next year. You have some mechanisms that have premier things like KBF to 10, which is awesome, okay? But that just pulls from KBF, right? It's kind of insular in its own organization. But in terms of a true kayak bass fishing champion representing the whole country, you've got to represent the whole country, which means you've got to pull anglers from the top anglers by invitation only from the Hobie Trail, the top anglers from KBF, the top anglers from Bass, and then I would say a few spots from some regional trails that are unaffiliated with those trails, but are pretty damn respectable in their own, okay? In order to do that. Or you take Hobie, Bass, KBF, and KBF's top performing ambassador locals who don't really fish in the Pro Series or whatever, but they finished in the top because maybe they can only fish on the weekends, and we get that, and they're not whatever, but they're still awesome sticks or awesome hammers. They deserve an opportunity, right? That to me is really the only way. If you guys have any other ideas out there about how you determine, because you can't do a power ranking, you can't do an RPI type thing on anglers that are competing in different trails on different bodies of water. You can't really do that. It's not apples and apples, right? They're not competing against each other. Now, again, some of the anglers do compete in multiple trails, so if they were provided an invitation, that would free up an invitation for someone else from those organizations. So I don't know. If you make it 100 anglers get invited, 125, I don't think you should go over 150. Personal. My personal opinion. But if you make it 100 or 125 and you take, you break it down, or if it's 150, you take top 25 points leaders in Hobie, top 25 points leaders, or top 50 in Hobie, top 50 in, 25 in here, or whatever that mix is, based on the percentage of the number of anglers that are actually competing in those trails. So Hobie, KBF, and then Bass in that order of the number of invites, I think would create more incentive for all of the anglers to participate in multiple trails during the season in order to have a shot at that invite. Okay? There's something about an invitation, mates. I don't care who you are. You get an invitation to a party, kind of makes you feel good. You don't get that invitation, you're kind of looking around going, what'd I do? Right? Somebody in your neighborhood's having a party and you don't get invited to. Okay? But this invitation is based on talent. It's based on how they performed. It's not based on cutting a check, buying your way in. It's not. Okay? And so, inevitably, and I've run this by a half a dozen people that I respect in the fishing community, inevitably, it all comes down to what it always comes down to. And this is a sad thing, and this is the truth. And you guys may not want to talk about it. People may not want to admit it publicly. People who have sponsors, don't want to admit things publicly. They don't want to jeopardize, their sponsorships, their pro staffing, their endorsements. But inevitably today, the first question that people ask, and I've already tested this out in the last few weeks, is, what's the payout going to be? And see, that's the mindset that has overtaken the fishing community. Is anglers have to worry about and consider what the payout is because they know inevitably the expenses that all go into competing at a top level and getting to a top event. And that's what the industry needs to eliminate. Okay? We've seen that a little bit with KBF, lowering its fees, lowering its entrance fees for teams, lowering some of the fees for ambassadors, you know what I mean? Because of the economy, because of inflation, because of all that stuff. And then meanwhile, you've got other organizations that are going to raise them. Because it's a business. And those events aren't for you. The events are for sponsors and for them and for the industry, right? I mean, let's have a candid conversation and a candid debate about the platform. Who's the platform really for? You're seeing that right now in the Kayak Fishing League. Who is that platform really for? It ain't for the anglers. Okay? It's not. It's for the sponsors and it's for the power that be that runs that organization. And that is just an observation on mine. It's just my opinion. Okay? My opinion. Because you've got anglers that are traveling and spending. Okay? And it's just like anglers in competing in a lot of these trail events. You got anglers in Texas that have to drive to Florida, South Carolina, Oklahoma, maybe Pennsylvania, maybe whatever, that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, okay, to compete in an event they're not even paid for. There's no payout for their event. It's for a little something dangling at the end of the line. But meanwhile, all season long, I've spoken to anglers in the KBF, spoken to anglers in Hobie, spoken to anglers in the KFL that have spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to compete. And in the KBF and the Hobie format, there's a payout at the end. They pay out a lot down, 20 places, I think, in a lot of those events. So there is a little cherry at the end of the event, right, that you can get to, that you can kind of recoup some of those expenses, and you've got the shot of getting a payout right then and there at the end of the event. I think the last event paid out $10,000 for Hobie on the Susquehanna. They've got another event this weekend in Appleton, Wisconsin. I mean, but if you're in the KFL, that payout is at the end of the season. If you're lucky, you're fronting all of those expenses yourself or through your sponsors if you're fortunate to have them. And what's that tab look like? I've spoken to mates, in Texas that have spent $5,000, $6,000. And now they're not even in the league anymore. So they were thrown out of that league. They're out a lot of money. Okay, not just their league fees, but they're out a lot of money that they put into their stuff and traveled and all of that stuff. Right when inflation hits, right, and gas is $5-6. So I think we need to have these candid discussions and debates about really what's happening in the community. Like, how do we elevate and name a national champion that is a true national champion in kayak fishing? And I just want to start that dialogue. You can comment on the Facebook or on YouTube. Whatever ideas you got, you go watch Craig Johnson. He's the bass side of it, boater side of it. Watch him on TikTok. Listen to his take on all this money now that's being required now for anglers. It's making it harder and harder for talent to rise to the top. We need to keep that from happening in kayak bass fishing for sure. But just go ahead, man, and comment. Let me know your thoughts on the matter. Should we have a national invitational to name a kayak bass fisherman, angler of the year, or champion?